Welcome to Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks and joined as always by Mr. Stephen Hackett. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
Excellent. I am looking forward to another episode of the Mac Power Users with our old friend Glenn Fleishman. Welcome back, Glenn.
Hey there. Thanks for having me back.
It's been so long. It's so long. We were talking before we hit the record button, pandemic, yada, yada. None of us see each other anymore, and it doesn't give us much of an excuse to talk.
We all miss Macworld Expo, but I didn't realize what a key part it was of like my extended social workflow, because it was a great event for lots of reasons, but it was always great just to get together with people who you really liked. And, we just also spread out around the world now, really.
Yes, absolutely. Before we get started, though, a little bit of housekeeping today. To begin with, Stephen is about to start a sabbatical. Tell us about that, Stephen.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a link in the show notes to a blog post I wrote about this, but taking a bit of a break in October. So I won't be on the show or any of my other shows. I won't be writing. I just taking some time to be at home. Nothing bad has happened. Nothing is wrong. It just seemed like a good opportunity to take a step back. The company, Relay is 10 years old. We just finished our monster St. Jude campaign, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And just want to unplug for a little while. So I'll be back in early November. And David, you have a lot of awesome guests lined up. I'm jealous that you're going to get to talk to a bunch of those folks, but I'm looking forward to listening to MPU for the first time in a long time. So that's where I'll be. And David, thank you. You are one of many people who are taking on extra work because I will be out for a while. So thank you for that. And I look forward to returning in early November.
I look at it as a month of MPU without the sheriff here, so I don't know what's going to happen in this little town.
It's all stream decks all the time.
I don't know, gang. We'll just wait and see. I do have some good guests lined up and some good ideas. I'm going to miss Steven. I can't wait for him to come back. But at the same time, we're going to have fun. And just to let you know, Steven's taking a month off, and good on you for doing that.
Yeah, congratulations. Really That's an incredible thing and very smart.
Yeah, well, thank you all. While we're just handing out thanks, I want to thank the MPU audience and really the broader Apple community. We've wrapped up our St. Jude campaign, which Relay does every year, and we finished for the first time over $1 million raised for St. Jude in September, which is a staggering amount of money. We also crossed $4 million raised since we started this in 2019. We started this campaign celebrating $3 million raised. We've ended it being over $4 million raised. Y'all have just totally blown us away. It has been an incredible campaign, and everyone who took part donating or fundraising or sharing the links or even just, listening about St. Jude and learning more about it. Thank you. It's a place that means a lot to me and my family and a lot of other families around the world, and just totally blown away this year.
Yeah, so many emails from listeners that made big and small contributions alike, and it just warms the cockles of your heart. Today on More Power Users, we are going to talk to Glenn about the thing that we like to talk about these days, Apple Intelligence. So Glenn's been around the block a few times, very smart tech reporter, and I am very curious to hear about your thoughts about AI in general and Apple Intelligence in particular. So we'll be talking about that at the end of the show. If you'd like to join More Power Users, it's the ad-free extended version of the show. You can do that at relay.fm/MacPowerUsers. Glenn, I'm not sure everybody knows Glenn Fleishman. You haven't been on the show for a while. So for those of you who have not met Glenn, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, gosh. I do a lot of different things and have done a lot of stuff. I've kind of a running tally on my website where it was like vocations I've engaged in, which include things like soundboard operator for community theater, being paid to write nonsense for a public radio promo, graphic designer. I don't know what all I've done, but most of my life I've been involved in design, graphic design and computing in some fashion. And those cross in lots of different ways. So I was an early World Wide Web host. I started a company in 1990. Oh, now I have to stop and think about it. 1994. I started one of the very first web hosting companies with a partner We hosted some Peach Pit Press back then, was one of the very early ones. Atlas
Yeah.
Modeled Railroad Company, which was owned by an uncle of my partner, and a few other sites. And because we were there so early, we got to meet really interesting people. Werner Herzog came by our offices. We hosted the first movie.
Wait a second. I got to hear about that.
Yeah,
Werner Herzog.
Werner Herzog. I got to spend an hour with Werner Herzog back in 1995. It was very interesting. He was a very interesting guy and told us amazing things. He came by. So you may remember this in the mid 90s. It was hard to get high speed. The internet was just starting up, right? The commercial internet. And it was hard to get a high-speed connection, but we had a T1 line, and we had an office in downtown Seattle, which was very depressed at the time after a recession, so we could get an office cheap. So we had this lovely space, and I was helping to incubate a company called Film.com, later bought by Real Networks, and it was just one person, and she was building this site. And she was connected with the Seattle International Film Festival, would help stuff there, introduce people and connect stuff. And so people would say, like, we'd like to see the internet. Like, oh, Glenn has the internet in his office. Let's go to his office. And we would show them the internet because we had, everyone else is using dial up and we had something that was a whopping 1.544 megabits per second. So Werner Herzog came by. Parker Posey, met Parker Posey because we hosted the first full-length streaming mainstream release movie streamed over the internet out of our offices. And that was became a network television segment, like NBC News came out and filmed it. So it was very weird. And then this still happens. Like All Recipes is actually founded out of my offices. I had nothing to do with it. I sublet space to some other entrepreneurs in Seattle. And just a few weeks ago, I got a call from a New Yorker reporter who said, "Hey, can you talk to me about All Recipes?" I'm like, "Wait, why? What happened to them?" Like, no, we're just doing a story about like the role they still occupy. And it was very interesting. And so I talked to this wonderful person who was herself a Great British Bake Off finalist. And she's become a food writer and writes for the New Yorker. And she wrote a great piece that just came out a couple days ago about All Recipes. But so it just felt like everything was happening in a very small space. You'd be emailing Jerry Yang, Jeff Bezos, and I would go out for lunch. I'm not trying to make it sound like a big deal. Like, these were all like tiny companies with no importance, right? And then suddenly, he's a billionaire, Amazon's $1 trillion, Yahoo became enormous. And I am a very modest person. I never really wanted to put out, I never wanted to build like a giant company. And so I'm like, see ya, see you later. And I'm just kind of doing my thing and making a living, and it's great. So,
well, I'm glad that you started the internet for us, Glenn.
Yeah, I helped turn some keys. But anyway, so that was, I wound up becoming a technology writer on the heels of that. I worked for Amazon for about 6 months in 96 or something, thought the company was about to fall apart, which spoiler it was, but they recovered before they fully fell apart. And then ever since then, I've been doing kind of a mix of mostly technology writing for the New York Times, The Economist, Macworld since the early 2000s, tons of publications, and kind of where the market is, I try to go and bring a sense of wonder in things that people aren't necessarily yet interested in. Like I started a Wi-Fi blog in 2001 and ran that for 10 years until Wi-Fi stopped being interesting. And that was a chunk of how I made a living, was just the advertising from a blog about Wi-Fi, if you can believe that. So
no, I mean, you were a guest on the show, and that was the big focus at the time because nobody understood it, and you were like on top of it. So
yeah, there's all that municipal Wi-Fi being built before the cellular networks were fast enough. And that's been my trick as a freelancer. You have to stay ahead of the staff writers, because the staff writers, they're there all the time. They're constantly talking to sources. They're enmeshed in it. And I would try to find quirky things that I thought were either undercovered or the next big thing, bring them to editors. They'd be like, well, no one's writing about that. Sure, you can go ahead. And I'd have kind of a weird beat for a bit, and then staffers would take over as the stories became more mainstream.
I have to go back really quick. Have you ever heard of the 24 Rules of Filmmaking from Werner Herzog?
No, I only know about the Dogma. Was it Dogma 95 or something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, I'll put a link in the notes. Okay, so he wrote down 24 rules of filmmaking, and they're really funny, well, not even funny. They're just they're very Werner Herzog, carry bolt cutters everywhere. That's one of them. Another one is thwart institutional cowardice. And so in my family, these are kind of legendary. We talk about them all the time. And the other night at dinner, I was talking about a problem I was dealing with, because we do a thing. Sometimes we go around, everybody talks about their biggest problem. And my daughter said, Dad, get used to the bear behind you. And that's like rule number 24. And I thought, you know what? I raised them right. They're quoting Werner Herzog to me now.
Let me give you one Herzog story. One thing I remember so vividly that he said is, we're showing him the internet, right? And he was like, well, what is this going to be used for? What are you going to do with it? And we said, well, for instance, like there are DVD extras. DVDs had come out not that long before, I think, maybe a few years before. It's like 95, I think, 94, 95. And he said, so any footage you don't use or any extras from your films, you don't have to have them locked away in a DVD. You could put them on a website. There will eventually be infinite storage, just like right now it's expensive, but that could be a thing. Someone could watch your film and see. He said, oh no, there's no extras. We're like, what do you mean? He's like, I burn all the footage after I edit my films. And we're like, what? And he said, yeah, I don't want somebody else re-editing. There was one definitive version. He said, I have this monologue of Mick Jagger from, I forget if it's Kaspar Hauser or something, whatever film it is. It's a monologue of Mick Jagger, and it didn't go in the film, so I burned it. And we're like, oh my God. And I was so struck by that. It was such an intense, and I also thought it was wonderful. You know, there's that, I had the same sense when my client on this book that we'll talk about that came out last year, this book Shift Happens about keyboards, he decided he did not want to have an ebook edition. And I'm like, you know, I'm not going to fight you on it. It's something so pure today about saying, I will not have an ebook edition of my book. I mean, there's accessibility and other issues that get into ableism. And I understand that. And we had conversations about that, but just the idea that the book is the material object and I don't need this immaterial version of it as a thing I'm also selling. I felt there was a Herzogian element to it.
Yeah, he was one other quick story. We'll move on. See, this is the problem the next month when Steven's gone.
I'm just sitting here.
Here's a preview.
Yeah.
Here's a preview.
It's already gone.
Yeah, I was at the Star Wars convention when they first released Mandalorian, and you know he's in it.
Yes.
And he had never seen Star Wars, didn't know anything about it, of course, because he's Werner Herzog. And there's this character Grogu, the baby Yoda that everybody lost their mind over. And before, when they're making the first one and they brought the puppet out, he says, is this how you're going to film it? Or is this a stand-in?
Yeah.
And the director says, well, we're either going to use the puppet or we're going to use AI. We're not sure yet. And he says, if you use AI, you're a coward. And that was it. And so they didn't use AI, but I'm sorry, not AI. CGI.
CGI.
Let me do my impression though. Is I would like to see the baby now.
Okay, yeah, so
I would like to see the baby. It's as weird seeing him in that as it was seeing David Cronenberg in it's David Cronenberg who's in Star Trek Discovery, right? Not Cronenberg. Yeah, it is, right? And it's so strange to see this incredibly prominent filmmaker, and you're like, what is the itch you need to scratch? But they're also so good because they bring that same kind of intensity to this world that is already unreal. It makes it even more unreal.
Okay, well, Glenn, you are a man of many talents, and that's why we love having you on the show because you really have been around in the tech industry as it grew up and involved with it, and I really enjoy that. But you're also often working in interesting side projects, and your typesetting skills have not gone to waste. But I have to mention as well your new relationship with Take Control since the last time you were here.
Yeah, well, I've been writing a bazillion books there. So I've always had a few in place, but at one point during the pandemic, I think I had 11 active books, maybe.
Yeah.
So now I think I only will have 5 or 6 because, there were a lot of things that needed to be written and a lot of people were buying ebooks and everyone was desperate for help. And in fact, I had this idea, and Joe Kissel, who's the publisher of Take Control, he signed on to it really quickly. I said, let's put out a book called Take Control of Working from Home Temporarily. Both the title to help people feel like it wasn't going to last forever, but also just advice from those of us. I put out a call, a solicitation on various social media and email people what are your tips? People have been working from home for years or decades. What are your tips for people who've never done it before? Got a lot of information, collated it. We put out a 60-page book, something. It wasn't super long, distributed free, tens of thousands of people download it. And I'm like, this, not much I can do in the face of a pandemic, but this is something I can do. And Joe felt the same way. It's we could do something that might help people adapt. But then we also did books like Take Control of Zoom, and there were all these privacy books. And so I kind of spent a lot of 2020 to all the way through 2022 writing and revising Take Control books as the rest of the freelance market had cratered for a while in the writing business.
And you also recently worked on this beautiful project called Shift Happens. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, this is a funny one. It was, I think, what, 7 or 8 years in the making. Is I kind of fell into it too. Is back in 2016 or so, that I see this fellow I'm following on Twitter. This guy named Marcin Wishari. He's posting about being in Spain and wandering into a industrial history museum and finding one of the world's greatest collections of typewriters. And the thread goes on and on. He's also a beautiful photographer, so his writing is good. He's got a really, far-reaching mind, and he's very interested in typewriters. And it was just a total fluke. Like, he was in this little town, Figueres in Spain. Just, he wasn't supposed to be there. Like, he was in the wrong place. He had the wrong day for like a Picasso museum. He wandered down a street. He sees a sign that says industrial history. The museum isn't typically open that day. He doesn't speak Catalan, like all these things. And then he eventually winds up on the second floor, and he's like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And this was part of his journey in writing this 1,300 plus page book about keyboards from typewriters to the present day. And he and I were corresponding a little bit, and I said, hey, are you going to kickstart this? Are you going to take it to a publisher? He's like, I don't know. I said, do you want an editor? Because I'm an editor and I can help you. And thus began a multi-year relationship that culminated in 2023. We got the book out at the end of 2023, and sold many thousands of copies. Had one of it's the number one tech book of all time on Kickstarter. It's not the number one book. There's a lot bigger books than that have done millions and millions of dollars. But it was hugely successful. It's a beautiful book, and lots of stories that he uncovered and told beautifully. So it's not just like, here's these models or whatever, but it's these stories about murder, intrigue, and spying, design, how Olivetti's design process arose for their beautiful typewriters, an RSI epidemic that happened, repetitive strain epidemic, ostensibly happened in Australia. Just like all these interesting things that he strung together. So it's kind of what they call like a picaresque story. You go from place to place to place, and each chapter is kind of a different piece of this larger whole as you're moving forward in time to what we're using today for keyboards. But it was a kind of a remarkable journey, because we had to learn. I've been working in printing since I was a teenager, and having things offset printed and doing graphic design. And but we were dealing with sort of the scale of it was so big. It was these 2 huge volumes, then a third extra volume that was a stretch goal, and slip cases, and the printer had to buy 300,000 sheets of paper to print the book. Like, everything was just monumental in scale, and it all, in the end, it all came off just fine. We got the thing out there, but it was just it was like building a ship and launching it.
Well, it's a beautiful looking 2-volume set, and I'm sure a lot of keyboard and typewriter nerds out there are going to be sad that they missed out on it, because it's all sold out now, right?
Yeah, I've been, Marcin is, he's got a good severity about him, I think, in a very positive way. As I was saying, this Herzogian notion is, he hasn't decided yet if he wants to do another printing, because there's certainly a market for it, but it was a lot of work on his part. He just had to put in a chunk of his life, and he has a full-time job. He works in UX UI, and as a manager. And so he took almost a year off at one point to move the book along a few years ago. But, he's trying to deal with this worldwide shipping thing, and I'm managing a lot of the details, but he needs to make tons of decisions, because it's his money being spent. It's his book, it's his project. So anyway, I don't know if there'll ever be another printing of it. So maybe it'll become like a ever more expensive rare item as people pass it around. I'm not sure. It's a funny thing, but yeah, it's gorgeous. And he put so much effort. He designed the thing, having never designed a book before, having never written a book before, English being his second language. I mean, he's spoken it for decades, but it's still, what a daunting thing. Like, I can't imagine, going off to write in a second language. It just is incredible in every angle. It's a great history.
Like Sisyphus, you're pushing another boulder up the hill now, though, right? Tell us about the comic book.
Oh, well, this is this is one of these improbable things. Is a few years ago, well, after a certain election took place, not to get political, I was trying to figure out a change in my life because the freelance writing business has always been tough. And I talked to a mentor of mine, and she said she was running a letterpress printing program at a local kind of commercial art school we have here that's since shut down, sadly. And the program has spun off into a nonprofit, so it's persisted. And she said, you should come and be our first designer in residence, because we want to launch one, and we know that you have the follow through to make it happen. So I did that, and I went and I designed and printed a book of a bunch of articles and essays I'd written about sort of language and type and printing, and did a Kickstarter to raise the money to cover the expenses, and spent a year very happily printing on an old letterpress press, which was great. And but in the process, I started finding, I was doing some historical research, and I started finding materials that I couldn't explain. I would find them on eBay, and I'd find people writing, like, weird scattered writing about it. And there's this stuff called flong, Flong, and it's a kind of heavy paper mat, and it was used to make molds to print from. So you would typeset a page of type, say, and it's all flat. And then you would put this flong, a sheet of flong on top of it, under great pressure, and pull it off, and suddenly it's a mold. And then a printer would pour hot lead into it, on typically in a curve for newspaper printing, to make a rounded plate. And then that plate is a duplicate of that flat typeset material that goes on press to print at high speeds. It's rotary, so it goes around really fast. The paper goes through. It was this wild process, and I got more and more obsessed about it. But then I started finding more materials related to comic strips and flong and these metal plates, and I wound up just digging more without knowing where it was going to go, dug deeper and deeper into the research, and decided there was enough to write about the history of printing, kind of through the lens of the way that comic strips for newspapers were created, both the way the artists drew them, the way they were marked up for color for Sunday comics, and then printed in newspapers, but then also the transitions that have happened from the development of newspaper comics in around 1896 to the present day. So that became how comics were made. I kickstarted that early this year, and was just on press with it last week, and it's shipping in October. It's shipping very soon. It's a very niche book, and people were very, very excited about it, which made me happy, because I wasn't sure if one person would back it or 10, and I think I got 1,700 backers in the campaign, and then I've sold pre-orders since. So that's been very exciting to find the interest in what I think is, even I think it's very obscure.
Well, it is and it isn't. There's a lot of comic fans or graphic novel fans, depending on what they call it, right? And so I imagine there's a lot of interest in the history of that industry.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I chose comic strips instead of comic books, not because I don't like comic books, but because comic strips are this distributed phenomenon. So when even today, it's still true even in the digital ages, there's something like 1,250 daily newspapers left in the United States. Used to be almost twice that many. And they receive, they work with syndicates, comic syndicates. Very few of them have a local strip. Some used to, and few still do, but mostly they license strips from comic syndicates, which have existed since the late 1800s in certain forms. And so you want to, put Beetle Bailey in. Well, that's King Features. You want to put Doonesbury in. That's Andrews McMeel Universal. And there's a couple other syndicates that are of that like. And so a newspaper has to get all this material from different sources. So what set me out of the book was, when it was all metal, how did a newspaper get a copy of a metal strip? And so I answered that question, and it's answered in the book. But so even through every evolution, the syndicates have had to come up with different ways to distribute the strips. And sometimes it's photostats, which are, essentially a kind of photographic paper or photographic process. Now, of course, it's digital files, or even some of the syndicates run pagination services. So a newspaper literally outsources their comic page layout to a pagination service, which puts all the comics in place and delivers them what are effectively PDFs. But because all this material is distributed, that there are thousands of newspapers, all of these old, great, wonderful physical materials kind of washed up on the shore like flotsam and jetsam, because they were just retained at all these different newspapers. And some, I don't know, I have a 40-pound metal plate, guys. This curved metal plate, it's a comics plate, was on press, and somebody saved it. They're usually melted down because all the lead was reused. Somebody saved it and put it up on eBay, 50, 60 years after it was used, and sold it to this sucker for not very much money. So it was with comic books. Comic book companies typically worked with a limited number of printers, and those materials were tightly controlled and then destroyed or reused, melted and reused. So there's almost no comic book material I could include in my book. So I had to focus by nature on comic strips because so much more was saved.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. So whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, you can stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything, products, services, and even content you're creating. Squarespace has everything you need all in one place, all on your terms. Make the most of design intelligence from Squarespace. It combines 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential. Design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful, more personalized website tailored to your unique needs, and craft a bespoke digital identity to use across one's entire online presence. And with Squarespace Payments, you have the easiest way to manage your payments in one place. Onboarding is fast and simple. Get started in just a few clicks and start receiving payments right away. Plus, give your customers more ways to pay by choosing from popular payment methods like Klarna, ACH Direct Deposit, Apple Pay, and Afterpay and ClearPay, depending on where you're located. And keep track of the stats that matter with Squarespace Analytics. Measure your end-to-end online performance with powerful website and seller analytics. Get insights on top traffic sources, understand how your reach is growing, track sales metrics, and learn where to focus new engagement. It's all the data you need to scale your brand or business, fully integrated and clearly displayed. I love building on Squarespace because these tools work seamlessly together. Let's talk about the analytics for a second. They're going to, of course, know about everything on your website, but if you're sending a newsletter through Squarespace, the analytics go there as well, and it's really easy to manage. You're not adding on external tools. It's all built in. So if you have a website to build or a website to rebuild, go to squarespace.com and sign up for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/MPU to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain name. That's squarespace.com/MPU when you decide to sign up to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of Mac Power Users and all of Relay.
Glenn, you're back on since the Apple Silicon Revolution. What Apple Gear are you driving these days?
Well, I knew I had this big project coming up, so there'd be a little bit of expense money coming in. So I upgraded. I bought a Mac Mini, an M1 Mac Mini. Oh gosh, 2021 maybe, after my beloved quad-core 2017 iMac just died. And it died so hard that even though we have a local repair shop in Seattle that will do component repair, they said it is not worth it. So, all right.
Really?
Yeah,
what
they
happened?
said, well, the motherboard died. They thought it might be the power supply, and they charged me a very modest fee to crack the case and try an alternate power supply. And they're like, it is the motherboard's fried for whatever reason. And they said, look, we can get you one, but it's going to be like $700 used. Do you want to invest that? So I got a Mac 1 Mini in 2021. I thought, and I've had a Mac 1, an M1 Mini, and I've had an M1 MacBook Air since 2020, and they've served me very well, but I was starting to see the limits. I'm doing a little more video production. I was doing some video about comics history, and I knew I was going to work on this graphics intensive book, me running Photoshop constantly and InDesign. So I got a Mac Studio late last year, I can't even tell you the specs. I think it's funny. I got whatever was the most sensible one, M2 Max. So it's not an M3, 32 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte internal drive. So I finally got myself a 1 terabyte SSD. I've been kind of limping by on smaller ones and using external Thunderbolt 3 or 4 drives and booting externally. But I was like, I want it all in one box this time.
Yeah, I had a listener write in about the new MacBook Air. She wanted to get the new M3, but she couldn't decide whether to pay extra for 16 gigabytes of RAM versus 8. And, first of all, she wrote to me, so she probably was looking to be, empowered. But I really feel like normally I would say 8 gigabytes will be fine, except for, the growth of AI and Apple Intelligence. I think RAM is going to be a big deal. So I told her, you guys tell me if I'm wrong or not. I told her to go ahead and get the 16 gig. You'll probably get a few more years out of the computer with the extra RAM.
Yeah, I think so. If you're looking for a long-term purchase, that can't ever hurt you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm astonished at how, I don't know what the right word is, maybe parsimonious or efficient the M series chips are with memory. Like it was baffling to me to go from a 32 gig quad core iMac to the, not single processor, but the M1, the first M1 with 8 gigabytes of memory. And it was night and day. I mean, there were things I could barely do on the quad core with 32 gigs. And my MacBook Air is like, nah, it's not a problem. Like, really? Nope. I can just, okay. So I feel like every additional gigabyte is like, it buys you a little extra, buys you a little less time, or maybe, especially for rendering or neural network stuff, it can help. But I don't regret getting 32 gigabytes. I'd like to have this Mac Studio for years. And if it lasts, 5 years or 4 years, I don't know that I need another computer until it dies practically.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I have the M2 Mac Studio, and I kind of want to run it into the ground because the only thing that there are things developing that may make this get too slow for something, but I think generally these Apple Silicon Macs are going to run a really long time, and I think most of us are going to be really happy with them.
Yeah, I'll tell you that my biggest upgrade recently, which is sort of funny, is that I got a dual 12 terabyte external HDD RAID unit that I've got in mirrored configuration because I have a lot of stuff that I need to store kind of locally, but sort of semi offline. So an HDD is fine, right? But I kept having these 8 terabyte drives would fail, after a couple years, and I'd be, oh my gosh, I had luckily I use Backblaze, and at one point I had to recover, I think 5 terabytes off a drive they sent me. So I thought, all right, I'm going to spend a little extra money. It's not terrible these days. I got a Mercury, I think it is from Otherworld Computing, and 12 terabyte drives are not that expensive. The RAID configuration is not expensive. And then I've got the enclosure. So if one of the drive fails, I'll just buy an identical drive and shove it in there. But what I'm waiting for, like the big breakthrough, we'll talk about AI later, but the big technological breakthrough I'm waiting for is affordable 4 terabyte SSDs. Like that's going to be game changing for me and so many other people, where you could string them together, you could bind them into a single bigger drive, or just use them as your main offline drive. Because I feel like we're still limited. Like 2 terabyte SSDs are now affordable and they're pretty good, but the 4 terabyte ones are still feel like they need to drop by 50% to start like really eating away the last of that bottom HDD market. And that's what I want.
You can get pretty close on Prime Day sales often, but yeah, that's like a thing you have to plan for. You can't just go out and buy it.
I want a little rack. Like I want a little rack in which I put 4 terabyte SSD, stick them in there. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even doing anything intensive. If I was a video editor, I'd probably be losing my mind. They still need, 24 terabyte. I don't know what kind of scale of things if you're doing serious work, like how many terabytes you have. I was talking to my younger, who's 17 now, the other day, and we were talking about something about computing. And I said, well, my first computer had 8K of RAM. They said, K? And I'm like, yeah, I have, a million times more memory now, or 4 million times more memory or something. And I had, my first hard drive in the late 90s or late 80s rather was, 60 megabytes. And I'm like, now I just look around my office and I've got 30 terabytes when you consider the mirrored drive. Just the scale is nuts. And then I'm like, but that's still not enough. I need more and faster.
Well, the thing that strikes me is the lack of insight we had at the time, because I started on a 4K computer.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came out the 8K one, we're like, well, what do you need 8K for? I mean, it's fine.
I think there's a famous quote about that by somebody.
Yeah.
You want to stop swapping those cassette tapes. That's what I want to stop doing. Remember the RC standard? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm tired of putting the cassette in and loading from the tape. I want to keep it all in memory at once.
Yeah. The beauty of it is the more power we get, we always manage to consume that power up to, the breaking point. So that makes the experience so much better.
I mean, there is something though to the idea, Glenn, what you said of like not needing another computer until this one, kicks the bucket. Like Apple Silicon is stretching out those upgrade cycles for a lot of people. There are a ton of people doing a ton of work on an M1 still, that's now coming up on 4 years old, and I think would have years of support and life left in it.
I don't find my MacBook Air, my 2020 MacBook Air, it still works for everything I want to do. I mean, when I travel, or if I'm just, I've kind of got a downstairs office in a daylit basement and upstairs at night. And so sometimes I want to do something, and it's really the screen that constrains me more than the processor. I have to wait a little longer for some things, but it's so capable. Like it's not 100 times slower than my Mac Studio. It's, 5 times slower or 2 times slower for some things.
Yeah, I say this to listeners of the show are probably tired of me saying it, but I feel like the leader here is the iPad. If you look at the iPad, it's a system on a chip that's been around for 10 years and they last forever.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's the Mac now. I mean, the Mac is basically like a glorified iPad anyway, the way they're making Apple Silicon. And I think we're heading into a period of very long-lasting computers. I was in an Apple store actually and talked to an Apple genius about this and gave him my theory. And he said, he says, I don't keep statistics. He's like, but we don't have to do a lot of work on Apple Silicon machines. Most of his work is on Intel machines.
It's the electric vehicle of the computer world. It's just there's less that goes wrong when it's silicon on a chip, but it's unless it totally fails. But yeah, it's kind of that. There have people have been predicting for a long time the end of upgrades, and I know the iPhone 16 prompted a lot of soul searching about the who needs this unless there's a very specific camera thing you want. I've got a 15 Pro and I almost did an upgrade, but I was on the upgrade plan and there were a couple features. There was a few things I wanted to try and write about. So I did get the 15 Pro last year, but I've upgraded almost every year because of writing and testing. And this year I'm like, gosh, why would I do this? There's just nothing that's compelling, and the phone couldn't feel any better to me than it does now. So I'm off cycle, at least for now. Maybe something will happen.
Yeah, there's a reason every time Apple gets in front of a microphone, they talk about Apple Intelligence, because that will drive phone sales.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty bland. I've got a couple-year-old Mac Mini. We've got a couple. It's actually funny, is I've always been a little like, well, what is the iPad for? And then what is the iPad used for? Not the iPad 4. What is it about? And then I think I have owned 9 iPads. Between me and the family, both my kids each have one. My older kid is in college for music education, and he has to do a lot of performance. And he said, look, one thing I need for college would be an iPad. You can give me the cheapest model, because all music is on iPads now. Everyone is using it. And it's just, we have so much music we have to manage. Do you mind? And we're like, we got very good financial aid. We're very happy, very, very excited about that. And we're like, yes, we can get you, an iPad 9th generation if you don't. And he's like, great, that's perfect. And it's an amazing improvement for musicians. But anyway, so I'm so bearish on iPads. And then I look back and say, well, I have bought only 9 of them over 14 years. I guess I am bearish.
Well, I mean, for music, there's like a control surface. It's a sheet music machine. There's a lot you can do with it. But what do you do with iPad?
I use it mostly for reading and watching movies on planes. And that's kind of hilarious. I mean, I got it partly for testing because I write these books, I need to have an iPad form factor and know how iPad OS works. I find it as I tried that thing of, I wound up traveling more in 23 than I think I ever have in my life. I had all these trips. I think I flew, this is very small compared to people who travel a lot, but I think I had 50 or 60,000 air miles, and just some of them were actually paid by other people, which is rare. I was brought out to do an event, a comics related event, in one place. And on some of those trips, I thought, I don't need my computer. This iPad mini, not even a full scale one, is all I need to bridge that gap between phone and computer. And it made those trips much better to not have that extra, piece of hardware with me. So I've never switched over to, I want to live the iPad lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no Federico. I haven't made my Frankenpad. But I do think it fits. It's kind of a luxury for me. It's like it fits into a weird little niche, but particularly like I fly on Alaska Airlines a lot, and they do in-flight. Well, I mean, a lot of the airlines do this now, but they do streaming movies for free in flight. And so having an iPad to stream to, an iPad mini with the tiny form factor, I just watch movies that are streaming on the plane, and it's like that is a significant improvement over laptop or phone.
Yeah, that iPad mini is very attractive on airplanes. That's the only iPad I've had people ask me about on planes, because when I travel with it, I bring just a little folding keyboard.
Yes.
And I've had people like get out of their seats and come over to me like, what is that? Because you can write, you can answer email, you can do real work with it.
Bring up the
but
terminal.
It fits almost in your pocket. And that's the only electronic device I've ever had people walk up to me on airplane and say, okay, just write down what I need to be able to do that on my next flight. I'm like, okay, iPad mini.
Can I ask you guys a question about hardware, which is how many AirTags do you each think you own, like across your families? How many do you think you own or manage? Is it like 2 or is it like 20? I mean, is it in that range?
I'd say at least a dozen. I mean, we have, because they have them on all the keys. And then for Christmas one year, I got everybody a couple, so they put it in their purses and their luggage. I have 3. So yeah, we've got a lot in our family.
Yeah, we do too. They're everywhere.
Every piece of luggage is
luggage.
Backpack.
I got one stashed away in my truck. We got one in my bag. Like they're just so handy, and you can often get them on sale. If you especially if you're like me, you're buying for a family of 5, right? You get a 4-pack on sale, Amazon and Best Buy and stuff sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
They're fantastic. They're really great.
All right, round robin. What's your most unique use of an AirTag?
Oh gosh, let's see.
I'm opening Find My. Let's see.
I got a good one, which is not anymore. Is my younger has some hearing sensitivity issues, and for a while they were wearing noise canceling headphones a lot, and unfortunately that's passed for them. But they wanted to take these relatively expensive ones they bought with their own money into school. And they were worried, well, what if they get stolen? What if I lose them? What if I put them down? And I said, aha. So, there's all these third-party Find My items you can buy. And Pebblebee had a matte black tag that was flatter. Also, it's completely flat. It doesn't have the bulge of an AirTag. So I got this adhesive that I actually use with laser cutting. It's a very thin, very strong, but kind of reversible adhesive. You can pull it off. We stuck the tag to the outside of one of the ear cups, so it was practically invisible because it was so matte. And then they were confident that they wouldn't leave it behind because they'd get the alert on their phone. So that is no longer, like eventually they didn't need it anymore. But for a few years, that was a unique and I think very handy use of a third-party fully compatible Find My tag.
What about you, Steven?
Maybe the most unusual is the one in the truck. I was just looking through Find My, but I do have a funny story about the alerts. I think last summer, my wife and I went out of state to visit some family, and for uninteresting reasons, we took both of our cars, and we left the same time, drove I-40, for across 2 states, and I kept getting alerts where like a bag would disappear because we'd be in traffic and she would pull a little ahead and the suitcases were on the roof of the van in our rooftop box.
You've left this behind.
Yeah. And I had to turn those alerts off for some of those AirTags because it was driving me crazy. But I was like, why is I'm driving. I was like, I could hear my phone going off in the cup holder, pull over and get gas or whatever. It's 100 Find My notifications.
There are 2 parking lots in Seattle, and I'm sure there are more, and there are more in every city, where there are 2 levels that are so identical. My wife has called me twice in the last couple of years. We have an AirTag in her car, and I actually, for whatever reason, we both drive each car, but like she drives one more than the other. So I finally put one in mine. I held off because of before they allowed Find My item sharing a year ago. You get those alerts. It'd be like you have an AirTag moving with you because you're in your wife's car or your partner's car. So anyway, we share those tags. But anyway, she calls me and she said, I can't find the car. And we're talking through it. And I'm like, and so the advantage is she's looking at it. I'm looking at it. I'm like, it hasn't moved. It's still there unless someone stole it and threw the tag out, and she's on the wrong level. But for at one point I'm like, hit your, alert button on your phone. And then she's like, wait, I hear it. She's like, oh my God, did I park down at level 1, not A? But I've been in both garages, and unless you are really paying attention, it feels like an optical illusion where you're driving up or down. Anyway, so I think the car use is incredible, just for peace of mind that your car hasn't been stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got two for you. One is my adult children have gone off to college now, graduating, got jobs, and now they're back home again. Well, they still don't care about remotes. So I got the Apple TV silicone remote with the AirTag holder in it. And it was like $10. Best $10 I've ever spent, because whenever the Apple TV remote's missing, I push a button and it beeps, whether it's under the couch or on the kitchen table or in the other room. And I love that. And the other one I just bought a few months ago was like Glenn, I wanted something to track my wallet. And over the years, I've done this thing where I like gaff tape an AirTag to it. And so it's never worked, and it's so thick. But one of my labs members pointed me to Chipolo, Chipolo.
I love these guys. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And they make a very flat, like it's the size of it's the thickness of 2 credit cards and about the same size. And it's a AirTag, and you stick it in your wallet, and then you've got an AirTag on your wallet, which is, I've been really happy with that. That's a preview for the gift guide this year, gang. I'm giving you one early.
Ooh, my wife and I each have one. I think I have a Pebble Bee, and she has one of them is rechargeable, and one of them has a long battery life. But when the battery's out, you can send it back to them, and they give you a 50% coupon.
Yeah, that's Chipolo. That's what they do. You mail it back.
If it's under 2 years, I believe they will replace it for free. Maybe also if you've, I think ours was just over 2 years, and they were perfect. It was like 2.5 years. There's also, let me tell you one more. This is a good one. I'm sorry. Let's be the Find My segment here. I write a book about Find My. You can tell how much I'm following it. I got an email the other day from 12 South. That company. They make a lot of really neat accessories.
Cool stuff.
They've got a thing called the Plug-a-Bug with Find My, and it's two different. There's a 50 watt and 120 watt version. It's got a Find My item embedded that's battery powered, plus the adapter. So the idea is you don't lose your expensive power adapter every time you leave a hotel room or somewhere because of the Find My warning. And I immediately texted this to my older child, who recently lost their adapter on a trip, and I bought them a new one. And they're not cheap, they're not, you can get inexpensive ones, but to get a good one. So I got them a decent replacement. But anyway, I thought it's a unique usage. And I think they want $70 for 50 watts and $120 for 120 watts, which is expensive, except when you consider the replacement cost. Then you're like, well, maybe that's not so bad.
Yeah. I have this private theory that Tim Cook listens to our podcasts.
Oh,
yeah. Because he gets up at 5 a.m. to work out, and why not listen to the Mac Power Users? So my message to Tim right now, Tim, put down the heavy weights. Just take a minute here. Put Find My in everything you make.
Gosh.
Just do that. We'd be so happy.
All the audio hardware, what's missing is, they need to put Find My in the Find My. So when you lose your AirTag, you can find it. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, that's not right.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Ecamm. Go to ecamm.com/MacPowerUsers for a powerful live streaming platform just for the Mac. Get 1 month for free. Ecamm Live is the leading video production and live streaming studio built for the Mac. Ecamm does all aspects of video, not just live streaming. It's perfect for simplifying your workflow. It's easy enough to get started quickly, but powerful enough that you can create just about anything with video. You can do it all with the Ecamm app. What I like most about using Ecamm is the way they've thought of everything, whether you want to do overview, scenes, effects, overlays, comments, green screen, lower thirds. They've got all the tools you need right there. And I love the way it's all designed to be optimized and used on your Mac. The developers put a ton of effort into giving you an all-in-one tool, and they continue to make it better. Whether you're streaming, recording, podcasting, or presenting, everything's there in Ecamm, including support for multiple cameras and screen sharing. And a live camera switcher lets you direct the show in real time. Stand out from the crowd with high-quality video. Add logos, titles, lower thirds, and graphics. Share your screen, drop in video clips, bring on interview guests, and use the green screen. You can do that and so much more with Ecamm Live. And the super exciting news is now there is Ecamm for Zoom. It's available for everyone on the pro level plan. A lot of us are working in Zoom. We're doing meetings all the time. So now you can automatically send Ecamm Live's audio and video outputs into a Zoom meeting, Zoom webinar, or Zoom event. And up to 8 Zoom participants as camera sources in your broadcast or recording. Plus, you can automatically create individual participant audio and video recordings and add Zoom chat messages to your broadcast or record as text overlays. Ecamm's members are entrepreneurs, marketing professionals, podcasters, educators, musicians, church leaders, bloggers, and content creators of all kinds. Get 1 month for free today at ecamm.com/MacPowerUsers. That's ecamm.com/MacPowerUsers using the code MacPowerUsers. That's a whole month free of Ecamm Live at ecamm.com/MacPowerUsers with the code MacPowerUsers. Go there now and check it out, and our thanks to Ecamm for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
So, Glenn, you spend a lot of time with words, writing, editing, and I know that you have recently been using Scrivener for some of your work, and that's an app that we talk about some, we get emails about. It's this really opinionated, purpose-built writing app, and I'd love to know how that's gone for you.
Yeah, I want to bump up just in to 20,000 feet for 1 second, which is I love that description of opinionated apps. And I think it's this is where people are like, why can't I get such and such software or hardware to work for me? And I say, it's because you're not mind melding with the people who make it. They aren't trying to make it for everybody. And years and years ago, there was a piece of software called Aldus Freehand that was made by Altsys originally. And as part of the buyout when Adobe bought Aldus, I think Freehand had to be, I remember it was spun off or something. Anyway, Freehand, in my mind, for doing vector art were 100% aligned. Illustrator made no sense to me. Well, guess which one survived? Illustrator. So I've spent the last 20, 30 years now working in software that I still barely understand, even though I've used Illustrator since the early 90s. And it's still just every other Adobe product, it's fine. So Scrivener the bump back down to standing at 1 foot above sea level. Scrivener is kind of like that. Like, it really is made for, I think opinionated is a great word for it. It's made for people who have a certain kind of workflow and a certain way of thinking about how they break ideas up to into some sort of structure. So it does have this great, there's almost like an index card organizing version, has a lot of writing tools. It's really great for moving things around. You can embed footnotes and comments, and it's really terrific. And so I used it to write how comics were made, because I have this say, maybe this is familiar to you both too, is sort of like the carrying capacity of your current memory. So when you're writing something and you're like, oh, I've just exceeded my carrying capacity, my RAM is overflowing,
out of RAM,
yeah, and I need to write to hard drive. So I've done some books that have been modestly long. Like I did a 64-page book, and I've done in the last few years and so forth. Or I was collecting articles together, already written, and just editing. But I was like, oh my gosh, this has exceeded my RAM. I've got to use a tool, because I write almost everything in BB Edit. That's my primary thing, BB Edit Markdown. And then when I need to, I migrate into rich text into something, usually Pages, sometimes Word if a client's using it, and I hate that, or Google Docs, which is better. But so Scrivener became the organizing tool for me, as I could kind of write. I tweaked its styles so there was the least distraction possible, basically using a few styles of heads, inserting footnotes, and using bold and italic. And that was basically it. And wrote everything almost as if I was writing, and kind of made the environment look as much BB Edit as possible, which is pretty easy. But then I had 19 chapters and then some appendices and other stuff, and it turned out to be fabulous. So it's still, it's a little bit, sometimes there's rocks in the gears. You're turning and going like, I can't figure out why this won't work. And I had real trouble figuring out how to export from it after reading all their documentation and forums to get endnotes to export correctly so I could import them into InDesign, but eventually pulled it all off. It all worked, and huge time saver, and I highly recommend it, though with that proviso that it may not fit everybody's brain. And I had to change a little bit in how I worked, but it was absolutely worth it for the sort of management and the reduction in friction in other areas of building something that big. It's like 50,000 words.
I mean, it is one of the best options, especially if you're going to do research-based writing, because you can put everything there and it'll accept whatever you throw at it, PDFs, Word documents, whatever. I wrote so many trial briefs and legal briefs with Scrivener over the years. I mean, it was developed to write novels, but it was a key tool to me as a trial lawyer.
I'll tell you, I had a good contrast too, as I wrote the first academic work I've ever done and may ever write. It was, not surprisingly, a chapter on flong and metal plates for a book that is forthcoming next year. I think still there's been some delays from the Oxford University Press, which is very exciting. And so this is using my weird, super specific expertise, but they work in Word and they gave me templates. And so I was working in Word, and at some point I'm like, I'm losing my mind. I'll bring it into Pages and then take it back, and there's footnotes and there's formatting. And I was thought, Word is disabling to me. Like, Word makes me feel like someone has tied all my fingers together. I don't understand how people use it every day. And I'm sure, again, it's the mind thing. It's like Word, I think Word is opinionated and their opinion is bad.
Well, I mean, I don't know, you can get used to it if you learn how to turn off the bells and whistles, but my knock is they just never take anything out of it. So it's like a 747 cockpit. It's like, I just want to write a document and get some of this stuff out of here. And they've tried over the years to simplify, but they never quite get it because they're really changed to that backwards compatibility wheel.
I know one thing in Scrivener that a lot of people like are the different layouts where you can have, I think they call it the cork board. You can have like chunks of text or information that you can move around. You have an outline view. What about those things click for you, Glenn?
I am kind of this bad person in terms of outlines. Like, I know, you learn in school, like they teach you. It's funny how when you become a writer, like when you write a lot, maybe both of you experience this, that you think back to elementary school and you think, oh, they were actually trying to train us to be writers, not just like do essays. And so some things I feel like outlining, and I was taught at, I don't know, age 10 or 11, or certainly in high school. And I'm just terrible at outlining. I forced myself to do it. So I did like the corkboard thing, and it helped me rearrange chapters. At some points, I was trying to figure out what is kind of the book is mostly chronological, but sometimes I have to jump back. So it was confusing about which order things would go into. So that really helped to have a visual, not just like a linear list, but to use the corkboard. The outlining it's never clicked with me in any piece of software. And I know there are people who live and die by outlining, and this is why we are all different human beings. So I mostly used the corkboard in early stages, and then just use that main editor and the side bar that let me kind of organize stuff into a manuscript and always see at a glance. I could look over there, and then when I wanted to cross-reference inside the book, I could just grab the other chapter and like drag it into, C quote blah, just drag it into that space. And that became my kind of primary method.
When you're not using Scrivener, you use shorter pieces. Is it all BB Edit at that point?
All BB Edit, unless somebody needs me to work in Pages or Word or a CMS, in which case it's still BB Edit and I don't tell them. And then I export the final thing as rich text and paste it in and clean anything up in the app I need to use. Someone just wrote an ode. Was it Wired? There was a nice ode to Markdown that came out. I just saw it on Apple News a few days ago. I think it was Wired. And it was just kind of this, it reminded me like how fundamental it's become. It's like, I get mad if I can't use Markdown. And then I'm so happy when 1Password, AgileBits added Markdown to secure notes in 1Password. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Why did it take this long? I'm like, oh, it doesn't, it's not that important, but my brain is all around it. I've got macros for inserting links, and I'm so into And BB Edit is, I know so many writers who are techie people like me where, we use code sometimes, but maybe most of our use is just because it is such an efficient writing method. I will tell you, I do use Grammarly. I don't know if either of you have a subscription or use the free version.
Yeah, I pay for it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know if it's a dirty secret or not. Sometimes I hear people really yell about it because it's got all those AI features, and I disregard or turn all those off or most of them. But there was a point a few years ago when I realized I'm aging, as I guess we all are, and I was making punk errors like subject verb agreement, and I wasn't noticing when I would go into proofread my own stuff. And I'm like, I need a little help. It's like, oh, this is great. I'm turning into something that's more professional, like things that I'm not catching as readily, or I just, things like that. And when they added the version, I'm not sure if it was just this year, Jason Snell told me about it. I had missed it, where you could have essentially Grammarly in every app on the Mac. And that's been, I don't say a game changer, but it's been a huge improvement because it's helped me when I'm not being as sharp as I like, when I'm not being as careful, or I'm like, something's wrong here. And it's like, you don't need a comma there, or this doesn't make sense. What about this? And I go, well, I'm not going to rewrite it in that way because that's flat. But now I see why this doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of having an extra pair of eyes. So that has been a big help, honestly.
I feel the exact same way. Like, it catches dumb things that I do, and that way I don't have, because I sometimes have an editor and sometimes I don't. And I just want to make sure I don't ship something that's got like a dumb error in it. And occasionally I find myself using the word very like 2 times in a post or something, and it catches that stuff. But when it tries to adjust the voice, I just ignore that. I don't need it telling me my voice is my voice. I don't really want it redoing that for me.
Exactly. I found actually I had a very weird use of it, but it turned out to be very helpful. Is when I'd finished writing How Comics Were Made, I had a proofreader and actually did, an editor and proofreader, and did 2 rounds with the proofreader because we had to do a lot of fitting on pages. So there was rewriting and correction. So she read the manuscript and then she did a quicker pass on the book in pages, which was invaluable because she found a zillion tiny things because she's great and just for consistency. But after she was done, I thought, there may be other things. I'm going to do it one more pass. I exported from InDesign using a script. I exported 100% of the text in every box in InDesign, concatenated it into one big file, and then opened it in Pages and used Grammarly and just kind of scanned through and found probably 15 little things. Some of them were not proofready things. Some of them were like, oh, this doesn't make as much sense or whatever, or had been errors I had introduced while entering the proofreading changes.
That happens. Yeah.
Yes. So even for that, it was like, I just made it a little better with a little bit of investment of time. So I'm a very happy Grammarly user. But again, sometimes you say it to people and they're like, why are you letting an app rewrite your words? I'm like, I'm not using those features.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Grammarly does a good job at giving you a lot of controls around that stuff. And I think the 3 of us are in alignment, right? Like, I use it for the grammar checking, but I'm not having it rewrite passages, right? Like, there's some things I do that it really doesn't like, but it's like, no, it's fine. It's not incorrect. It's just my style. Like, take a breath, and you can teach it to ignore certain things. So I think out of the box, Grammarly is too aggressive for someone who considers themselves a writer, but that doesn't mean it can't be a useful tool with some tinkering. This episode of MPU is made possible by KRCS, one of the oldest Apple premium resellers and your one-stop shop for all things Apple in the UK. The Mac is easy to love and even easier to own. It's certainly my favorite computing platform. And if you're one of our UK listeners, you can spread the cost of any Mac over 6, 24, 36, or even 48 months with Klarna and KRCS. This means you can buy the MacBook Air M2 for just £22 a month. And you can make your Mac truly yours and have the exact specification you want, with pricing you're just not going to find anywhere else. Or choose some popular in-stock models and spread the cost with affordable monthly payments. With free next working day delivery on in-stock items ordered before 3 p.m., there's never been a better time to get a Mac at KRCS, your local Apple experts. Get more information at krcs.co.uk/podcast or click the link in the show notes. Representative 9.9% APR. 18 plus, subject to approval, terms and conditions apply. Please spend responsibly. Borrowing beyond your means could seriously affect your financial status, and ensure you can afford to make your repayments on time by the due date. Our thanks to KRCS for their support of MPU and all of Relay.
Glenn, we always like to wrap up the show by sharing some of your favorite apps and services. What are some of the little apps and services that bring you joy and delight?
I will tell you, it's the funniest thing. One of my favorite apps that I've discovered in the last few years is Text Sniper. If you have not encountered that, it's a tiny app that lives in the system bar. It's available with you can invoke it with Command Shift 2, I think is the default, and it recognizes text. It does OCR on anything on your screen. It can do QR code and barcode recognition as well. Now, so Apple, of course, has live text, which I did some head-to-head comparison a few years ago for Macworld and tried, like Acrobat and Microsoft's OneNote, I think, has it, and a few other things. And also, at that time, I don't think I was using Text Sniper, but was later able to compare it. And Text Sniper is as good as live text. Like, I don't know what their engine is. PDF Pen Pro, that was the other one, right? And theirs is pretty good. Acrobat was weirdly terrible, and Microsoft was okay, but very wonky to use. But Apple's live text is great. Text Sniper is great, and Text Sniper will work in contexts that Apple doesn't. So you'll go to a web page, and if it's not an image and it's Safari in a certain way, you can't just click and select the text. Or it just feels like there's places where I can't get live text to do its thing, or I'd have to make a screen capture, then open it in preview, then select the text. And so I use Text Sniper for that. So it's kind of a tiny extra arsenal tool. And the other thing is, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Isn't it funny? I use it all the time. It's called a Pop Clip, which is just like a tiny menu that when you do selections, it adds things to it. And it can be like dictionary lookup, does typo correction, copy as plain text, Wikipedia lookup, open link, and they have and convert to title case and sentence case, which I use all the time while selecting book titles.
Yeah, the case tools and PopClip, those are golden.
Oh,
yeah.
I hear so good. Some PopClip users. Yeah, I think it's one of the greatest little utilities. Like Text Sniper and PopClip rank up there with like default folder for me of just saying everyone should just install them because you'll have a reason to use them.
Yeah, we did a big feature on PopClip recently.
Oh, great.
And the feedback we got from a lot of people is they didn't realize that you can go on the website and download additional tools. Like they just use the default. Boy, that's like half the fun, is going in and getting the custom tools for whatever your setup is.
I love that. Yeah, that's I would say my favorite thing is I didn't realize that initially, but after using it for just a little bit, I discovered it, and it was like, oh, it's just a thing that you think, Apple has versions of it in the contextual menu and in other places, but it's funny how quickly, I think it stopped working. Like it had crashed on my MacBook Air, and I was like, part of my brain is missing. What's going on? It's like, oh, I just need to relaunch PopClip, and then I have that back.
I have a question for you, Glenn, because I know you are a very particular fellow, Jeopardy champion and all that. Do you trust the PopClip title case? Is it good enough for you?
It's I think it's better than I also use and again, this is something I use so often I'm forgetting the name of it.
Keyboard Maestro, they do that
Pastespot. I use Pastespot for clipboard management. Pastespot also has title case, and I think PopClip is somewhat better. I think it does the prepositions lowercase, prepositions and conjunctions lowercase as appropriate, where I believe that Pastespot is programmatic. And then you've got like the BB Edit one, which is, I can't remember if the BB Edit one, I use that sometimes, and I think I have to go in and correct things. So I think PopClip is the best conversion I have available to me. I think that's the one I go to.
Well, that's a relief, because I've been using that one, and I've been too lazy to check it against anybody else.
Yeah, it is great. And to echo what y'all said, the superpower of PopClip is that a bunch of people have written extensions for it, including our friend Brett Terpstra has a whole bunch of them on his website. I used it forever ago and then reinstalled it when we did episode 757, where we talked about Mac utilities. and it has stayed in my menu bar ever since. And it's one of those apps that once you get the hang of it, like you said, if it's not working, your brain feels broken.
Yeah, like there's that go-to of like if you were setting up a machine from scratch and you couldn't just migrate, what would you install? Like default folders, like instantly default folder, put that in there, and then then there's the other stuff. There's like I was using Bartender for a long time, but I did not like, as many people didn't, the conversion to new owners, so I went to ICE, which is great. It's not quite as configurable, but it's got everything I need. So like it would be like install Dropbox, install ICE, install PopClip, install Text Sniper, I'm still using an older version of Text Expander, like just for certain things, and then the machine would feel like it was mine.
You mentioned default folder X a couple of times. Where does that fit in?
Oh my gosh, I've been using it so long that I almost forget it exists as a separate piece of software. Because I'm a folder organizer. Now, there's many kinds of people in the world, right? And and some people are folders all over the desktop, folders and stuff all over the desktop people. And if you're not one of those people, it makes you insane. You go and you see somebody's desktop, you're like, what are you doing? I'm like, that's where I keep all my stuff.
I have exactly one screenshot on my desktop right now. That's it.
I hate to tell you, I have like 11 things on my desktop, but it's mostly empty. It's a few things that I like, drag and droplet things, right? You drag in. So I am definitely, when Spotlight was introduced, it dramatically reduced my desire to organize into folders as obsessively, because it answered most of my needs for finding things that I couldn't find that were just too old for me to remember exactly where they were. I could just use keywords and things like that. But I still like all my current projects and certain kinds of data I organize. So default folder, it's like I couldn't live without it, because I'm constantly jumping the preset locations, and even the snap back to the last folder you opened or saved in is immensely useful. I was managing, there's like 2,000 files with all the images and other stuff for how comics were made, and I'm trying to keep that all in one place. I'm trying to not have stuff outlying, and there's tools in InDesign to organize when you export it all, but I want it all in one place. And just being able to snap between a few different folders I was using for draft versions and production versions of images shaved probably hours off the entire project.
Yeah, that gets me into trouble. I like default folder too, or default folder as well, except I do a lot of screencasting, and man, if I forget to turn it off, I get so much email later. It's like, what was that save thing? What was that thing you did with your save dialogue or whatever? And it's it's a different app.
Oh yeah, all the extra Chrome or whatever you want to comes up around it. Like, what is that? Like, oh my gosh. Like, just tell everyone to install it, but it's confusing, I realize.
Yeah. And one thing I love about that app, it has been around forever. I'm not 100% sure on this. I believe it's a father-son development team. That's how long the app has been around. And it definitely started back in the Next days. I mean, and it's just been around a long time, and they managed to keep it up.
I'm trying to remember the fella. It's not Dave, is it? Who's the? They're such lovely people. Whenever I have to interact with I feel so bad. I can't remember his name. It's oh my gosh. Well, we all know who we're talking about. Well, this is the problem with age. They're just, it's just a lovely experience. And whenever there's bugs fixed, they're always right on top of the new releases. And it's been a great pleasure to use it. I wrote a piece for Macworld about programs that had been around for at least 25 years. A few years ago, it was this big roundup. Oh my gosh, I wrote this 6 years ago. The old guard of indie apps has thrived. So all of those apps are still around. And I think I focused on, it was BB Edit, pCalc, Fetch, and Graphic Converter. And I think default folder might not yet have been at 25, but it was pretty close. It certainly is now. So a bunch of people wrote me in afterwards and said, oh, these guys have been around for 25, or I'm like, oh really? So, you can almost do today, 6 years later, you could probably do the 15 Mac apps that have been around for 30 years, 25 or 30 years or more that we're still using today.
I mean, one of the biggest benefits we get as Mac users is that independent developer community that, early found a way to kind of make a living off of it, just making apps. Just the other day, I was looking at Hazel, made by a single guy, just continues to make it a great app. And he makes a living off of it. And I just love that. And it gives us these great bespoke little apps that you just don't generally see over in Windows.
Yeah, it's funny how useful they are too. Like, despite, I mean, some things get Sherlocked, but pCalc, right? pCalc, there's plenty of calculators, and Apple has improved the calculator, and particularly in recent years, I think a little bit, right? But pCalc is why, and there are other calculator things too. I once wrote this comparison of a Solver, Soulver,
Yeah.
and pCalc because they have such. I use both, and I use Solver more often because I don't need that many calculations. I am constantly doing things like how many hours does it take to download 4 terabytes at X kilobits or X gigabits per second, and Solver is designed for that kind of answer. And if I was doing more calculations, what I do, I pull out pCalc and I'm sitting there with my numeric keypad on my 101 key Mac, or not Mac Alley, but it's Matthias, of course, right? Matthias.
Yeah, we were going to ask you that. I meant to ask you that earlier. You made a book about keyboards. What keyboard do you use?
Well, and this is the irony I have to disclose, is like, I'm not a big keyboard person. I like the utility of them, but I'm not somebody who's collected or has real fussiness. But I always loved the original Apple 101, of course, the famous oh gosh, what was it? See, I can't even remember the model number that everyone loves so much.
The extended keyboard too.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. And I had one of those. And so when Matthias came out, I think I bought one of their first ones when they were still in the, like, we need to sell X keyboards so we can get the molds made. So I'm on my, this is always that question. If you're on your X unit from somebody, does that show loyalty, or is their product not made that well? Well, Matthias, I think, makes a very strong product, and you know how keyboards do wear out. Mechanical keyboards lose their oomph. So I want to say I'm on my 5th or 6th Matthias since I bought my first. This one's been going for many years, so I'm a little worried. My finger acid has not eaten away the keyboard labels quite as much on this one, so they must have improved their anti-Glen finger acid formula on these. That was one thing I learned from Shift Happens, by the way, is how they do the dye injection to get the colors and those old keyboard keys that had, like, the keys were almost etched out. They would do like a 2-part dye injection thing that was really cool, or dye molding process. These are, I believe, are all just silk screened and then shellacked or something, so they're to preserve them, so it's easier to eat away the finish.
Yeah, Stephen and I are both bad Mac power users because neither one of us have a collection of keyboards.
Yeah, I'm just using Apple's Bluetooth one with Touch ID.
I'm a 2 keyboard person. I've got the Matthias. I really like a mechanical keyboard. I need the feedback. So I've always got a mechanical one. And then I have a softer keyboard when I was doing a lot of note taking while I was doing a lot more reporting. I would use a quieter one. And so sometimes that was the Mac Alley had one I liked for years and years. That one worn out. And then I got the extended keyboard with Touch ID for my Mac Mini that I now use with the Studio Mac, or the Mac Studio rather, because I want Touch ID on my Mac, and it was worth buying. I haven't gone to Jason Snell. Is it Mike Hurley? Has he already done that too?
Yeah.
I haven't cut the key out, but I use it because it's such a quiet keyboard. So if I'm on a call and someone can hear the typing, I will use that as my quiet keyboard. Plus, I use it for Touch ID only.
I used to have this pipe dream that Apple would release a trackpad with a Touch ID button in the corner, but I don't think they care. Honestly, I don't think they're ever going to do that. I think it's like, you're going to get on the keyboard or you don't get it.
I think that's right. And I mean, I guess it makes sense, as there's no extra utility for them. So why should they bother? They figure you're going to be all in anyway, or you're not going to care enough. So there you go. Or you have a watch. I mean, I will use my Apple Watch. Sometimes I have a authentication issue or the keyboard's running out of power, and I'm like, I'll just use my watch to.
Yeah, that's a good feature.
Well, Glenn, it's always great having you on the show. I'm sorry it's been so long since we had you on, and I really appreciate you coming back to share everything you're up to and all these great workflows today. Where should people go if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Oh gosh, let's see. Probably the best place is I have an actual blog. I mean, they can go. The easiest thing is I made this up because I needed something briefer to say, and so it's a great URL. They can go to glenn.fun, 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 Glenn with 2 N's, fun with 1 N, takes you to my main website, and then that links to the blog, books I've written, Mastodon, other kinds of things. I do update a blog several times a year, and my current book, you can go to howcomicsweremade.inc, or just hwcm.ink. And the book's still available. I have some copies. I ordered somewhat above the number needed to fulfill everything to date, but it's going to, I hope it's going to sell out by the end of the year. So if the book sounds interesting, probably a good time to get it in this printing. And then like my client author, I got to think about like what happens in the future if there's enough demand to do another one. But it was really fun to go on press and really good to get it out there.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for today. If you're a More Power Users subscriber, stick around. We're going to be talking about Apple Intelligence and AI in general. Thanks to our sponsors, Squarespace, Ecamm, and KRCS. And we'll see you next time.